Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Saturday, June 13th, 2026, and you're listening to Alex's News. In Riverside, you can expect a high of 89.2 degrees and a low of 65.3, so it is a good idea to seek out some shade if you have plans to be outside. On today's program, we are digging into the details surrounding the expiration of a major American surveillance statute and why it was allowed to lapse. We are also breaking down the fierce budget battle in California that was ignited by a multi-billion-dollar financial package directed at oil refineries. In addition to these reports, we will cover several other important headlines making waves today. We have a lot to get through on this edition of Alex's News. Stay tuned. We're starting this morning with a major development out of Washington that could reshape how the United States conducts intelligence gathering. At midnight on June 12th, just yesterday, Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act officially lapsed. For more on what this means, we're joined by our national security reporter, Ethan. Ethan, good morning. Can you walk us through what actually expired here?
Good morning, Grace. So Section 702 has been on the books since 2008. And it's really considered a cornerstone of American intelligence work. It lets agencies like the NSA, FBI, and CIA collect electronic communications of non-U.S. citizens who are located outside the country. According to NPR and KATV, the government says this single provision contributes more than 60% of the information in the president's daily brief. So when we talk about it lapsing, we're talking about a really significant moment.
60% is a striking number. What kind of information are we actually talking about?
We're talking about emails, text messages, phone calls, the full range of digital communications. The law allows the government to compel companies like Google, Verizon, AT&T, and Microsoft to hand over that data. Officials cited by Fox 11 Online say it's vital for monitoring foreign terrorist groups, tracking cyber actors out of Russia and China, and going after the supply chains behind synthetic opioids like fentanyl. And intelligence leaders have been especially vocal about the risk of letting this lapse during the ongoing war with Iran.
And there are some big events coming up too, right?
That's right. Officials have specifically pointed to the 2026 World Cup and America's 250th anniversary celebrations as moments where heightened intelligence gathering would normally be critical. So their concern is that we're entering a period of elevated threat right as this tool falls into legal uncertainty. That makes the timing of this lapse particularly uncomfortable for the intelligence community.
So how did we actually get here? Why couldn't Congress get this across the finish line?
It really comes down to a political standoff over who's going to lead the intelligence community. President Trump nominated Bill Pulte, who currently runs the Federal Housing Finance Agency, as acting director of national intelligence. Pulte was tapped to replace Tulsi Gabbard, who's set to step down effective June 19th, just 6 days from now. And according to NPR and CBS News, that nomination triggered immediate bipartisan backlash.
Bipartisan backlash is pretty unusual these days. What specifically were lawmakers objecting to?
Critics pointed to Pulte's total lack of intelligence experience and his history of using both social media and his housing office to go after political opponents. Senate Intelligence Committee Vice Chairman Mark Warner of Virginia called Pulte, quote, extraordinarily unqualified, end quote. House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries described him as, quote, a political hack, end quote. And even Senate Republican leader John Thune expressed reservations, saying, quote, we don't need a weaponized DNI, end quote. So this wasn't just Democrats pushing back.
So Democrats and some Republicans essentially used FISA as leverage?
Exactly. They refused to support even a short-term extension while Pulte remained the pick, worried he'd weaponize the surveillance apparatus. In a last-minute attempt to break the deadlock on June 11th, that's just 2 days ago, President Trump nominated Jay Clayton instead as the permanent DNI. Clayton is a federal prosecutor and former SEC chairman. But CBS News and Axios report the move came too late to prevent the midnight expiration, and Senate Democrats are still demanding guarantees that Pulte won't even serve in an acting role.
So with the law lapsed, are American spies just going dark right now?
That's the interesting part. Not immediately. According to analysis from NPR and the Brennan Center for Liberty and National Security, there's a legal grandfathering mechanism that lets collection continue for now. Back in March of 2026, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court issued a new set of one-year certifications for the Section 702 program. Under the law's transition procedures, those certifications stay legally binding for a full year, so the operational authority actually persists until March 2027.
So there's basically a 9-month bridge built into the system?
Exactly. Elizabeth Goitein of the Brennan Center noted that the law is clear. Electronic service providers must continue to comply with existing directives, even if the underlying statute has lapsed. So in practical terms, ongoing surveillance of existing targets keeps going. But intelligence officials warned in reports via KATV and Fox 11 that this creates what they're calling a dangerous legal gray zone.
A legal gray zone. What does that actually mean for day-to-day intelligence work?
It means while existing targets remain covered, the government may really struggle to issue new directives to new providers or adapt to new threats as they emerge. There's also a significant concern about the loss of statutory indemnification. That's the protection that shields tech companies from civil lawsuits when they assist the government. Without that legal shield in place, companies may become much more cautious about cooperating going forward. And that's where things could get complicated quickly.
Speaking of the tech companies, how are they responding so far?
As of today, June 13th, no major tech company, including Meta, Apple, or Google, has announced any cessation of cooperation. NPR notes that companies refusing to comply with active FISC directives risk fines of up to $250,000 per day, which is a powerful incentive to keep playing ball. Some U.S. officials have suggested certain companies might use this lapse as an opportunity to challenge the law in court. But legal experts believe those challenges would be resolved quickly by the FISC, which has 30 days to rule on such matters.
Have we heard from any of these companies directly?
A T-Mobile representative, according to news reports, indicated that while they review every request carefully, their compliance protocol remains unchanged for now. So at least for the moment, the cooperation is continuing. But there's a lot of watching and waiting happening in Silicon Valley right now to see how this plays out politically.
Now I want to ask about something you mentioned earlier, the underlying friction in Congress. What's really driving the long-term fight here?
It comes down to what's called the backdoor search loophole. Section 702 technically targets foreigners, but it inevitably sweeps up communications of Americans who are talking to those foreign targets. And the FBI and other agencies can then query that database for information on U.S. citizens without ever getting a warrant. NPR reports that reform-minded lawmakers, ranging from civil liberties Democrats to America First Republicans, have been demanding a probable cause warrant requirement for those queries.
And was Congress getting close to any kind of reform before all this fell apart?
They were, actually. Before the Pulte nomination derailed negotiations, Congress had been moving toward a 3-year extension with moderate reforms. But those reforms stopped short of the warrant requirement that privacy advocates were demanding. Critics like Senator Ron Wyden and Representative Jamie Raskin have argued that the whole national security crisis narrative is really political fear-mongering, designed to force what they call a clean reauthorization that bypasses these privacy protections.
So what happens next? When does Congress actually get back to work on this?
The U.S. Senate is expected to return next week, with Jay Clayton's confirmation hearing tentatively scheduled for Wednesday, June 17th. That's just 4 days from now. However, the House of Representatives isn't scheduled to return until the week of June 22nd, so we're looking at over a week before both chambers are even back in session. Until then, the surveillance apparatus keeps running under that safety net of the March 2026 court orders.
So in the bigger picture, how significant is this moment historically?
It's genuinely historic, Grace. This marks a real breakdown in the bipartisan consensus over national security powers that's held for years. Even though the operational impact is cushioned by those existing court orders, the long-term future of what officials describe as America's most significant spy tool is now in deep political and legislative uncertainty. And it's a reminder that intelligence authorities, no matter how entrenched they seem, can still get caught up in larger political battles.
Really fascinating reporting on a complicated story. Ethan, thank you so much for breaking it all down for us this morning.
Always a pleasure, Grace.
Now to a major political showdown brewing in Sacramento that could reshape California's climate policy. Senate Democrats are threatening to block Governor Gavin Newsom's top priorities over a fight about carbon permits. For more, we're joined by our political correspondent, Chloe. Chloe, good morning.
Good morning, Grace. It's a fascinating standoff, and it really comes down to a deep rift between Newsom's administration and the progressive wing of his own party. At the heart of it is a $4 billion program that critics are calling a giveaway to polluters. And with the budget deadline closing in, both sides are dug in pretty hard.
Let's start with that program. What exactly did the Air Resources Board approve?
So in late May of 2026, just a couple of weeks ago, the California Air Resources Board, or CARB, approved something called the Manufacturing Decarbonization Incentive. According to reporting from CalMatters, the program hands out 118 million free pollution permits to major industrial polluters. We're talking oil refineries, cement plants, and other heavy industry. The total value is around $4 billion, and nearly half of those permits are earmarked for the fossil fuel industry.
Free permits worth $4 billion. What do these companies have to do in return?
They have to pledge to invest in on-site clean energy and efficiency upgrades. That could mean replacing fossil fuel-powered boilers with electric ones, switching to green hydrogen, or putting money into carbon capture and sequestration. But critics say those pledges don't actually guarantee meaningful emissions cuts. Policy advocate Katie Valenzuela said the rule is, quote, a huge stain, end quote, on Newsom's climate legacy. She and others see it as a massive subsidy without real accountability.
And that's where the Senate pushback comes in. Tell us about this deal is a deal framework.
Right, this is the Senate Democrats' counteroffensive, and it's being led by Senator Eloise Gomez-Reyes, who chairs the Senate's Climate Budget Subcommittee. Their argument, as CalMatters lays it out, is that Newsom is unilaterally breaking a three-party climate agreement that was struck with the legislature back in 2024 and 2025. That deal, called the Climate Commitment, was a multi-year plan to spend $54 billion on environmental projects. Senate Democrats say the governor can't just rewrite the terms now.
So how does giving away permits actually undercut that $54 billion deal?
It comes down to revenue. Normally, the state auctions off these pollution permits, and that money flows into the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which pays for climate and community programs. But if you're handing the permits away for free instead of selling them, that revenue stream shrinks dramatically. The Legislative Analyst's Office projects that annual revenue will be cut in half, dropping from $4 billion down to $2 billion. Senate Democrats argue that creates a massive revenue hole that will defund community-focused programs.
And to push back, the Senate is holding up some of Newsom's biggest priorities, right?
Exactly. As of today, June 13, 2026, the Senate is using several of the governor's top items as leverage in budget negotiations. One of the big ones is a sustainable aviation fuel tax credit. Newsom wanted somewhere between $165 million and $300 million for clean jet fuel, but the Senate rejected it. And CalMatters points out that Phillips 66 is currently the only company that would benefit from that credit, following the conversion of its Rodeo refinery.
That's a striking detail. What else is on the chopping block?
Quite a lot, actually. Funding for high-speed rail, electric car tax credits, and wildfire prevention are all in jeopardy right now. Lawmakers are also pointing to potential service cuts at BART and Muni as evidence of real-world harm. And they're highlighting stalled affordable housing projects, including the Paseo Center family housing in San Jose, to make the case that this revenue reduction will hit working Californians hard.
So how is the Newsom administration defending this approach?
Their main argument is something called carbon leakage. CARB Chair Lauren Sanchez and the administration say if compliance costs get too high, refineries will just pack up and move to states with weaker environmental laws, and they have some recent data to point to. According to Feedpunk and industry reports, California's gasoline production capacity dropped 20% between 2025 and 2026. That followed the closures of the Phillips 66 Wilmington refinery and the Valero Benicia facility.
And gas prices are already painful for drivers, aren't they?
They really are. Gas prices have been running above $6 per gallon in mid-2026, which is a huge political pressure point. The administration warns that if more refineries exit the state, you could see catastrophic fuel price spikes and a heavier reliance on high-carbon fuel imports from overseas. They also point to what they call hostile federal opposition and the rollback of federal clean energy incentives. Their argument is that California has to create its own incentive pool to keep industry from leaving altogether.
That sounds like a strong case, but are economists actually buying it?
Not all of them. No economists at the UC Berkeley Energy Institute and analysts at the Legislative Analyst's Office have been pretty skeptical. They've described the manufacturing decarbonization incentive as, quote, exceptionally generous, end quote. In fact, their analysis suggests refineries could end up getting as much as 156% of the allowances they actually need. So critics say this isn't really preventing leakage, it's overshooting it by a wide margin.
And what about the real reason refineries are closing? Is it really carbon pricing?
That's the other piece of the skepticism. These analysts argue the closures are being driven by a long-term decline in gasoline demand, not carbon pricing alone. Californians are buying more electric vehicles, fuel efficiency is up, and the market for gasoline is shrinking. So handing out free permits may not actually keep refineries open if the underlying demand just isn't there. It's a structural shift, not just a regulatory one.
There's also a legal angle to this. Walk us through that.
Yes, and this is where it gets interesting. To protect the Cap and Invest program from being challenged as an illegal tax under Proposition 13, the 2025 reauthorization required a 2/3 supermajority in the legislature. That legal maneuver actually gave the administration the authority to distribute free allowances if needed to protect economic stability. So the Newsom administration is now exercising a power that lawmakers technically signed off on, even though many of those same lawmakers are furious about how it's being used.
So the governor has legal cover, but not political cover. Where do negotiations stand right now?
As of today, June 13th, there's still no final budget agreement. The legislature did pass what's called a unified two-house agreement on June 11th, just 2 days ago, and that was to meet their June 15th pay deadline. But the bigger negotiations, what people in Sacramento call the Big Three talks between Newsom, Assembly Speaker Robert Rivas, and Senate President Pro Tem Mike McGuire, remain really fraught. There's a lot of pressure and not a lot of trust right now.
And are the Assembly Democrats lined up with the Senate on this fight?
Interestingly, no. Senate Democrats are holding firm on their deal is a deal stance, trying to protect that $2 billion in Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund revenue for transit, clean air, and safe drinking water programs. But Assembly Democrats have stayed largely quiet on the rule change. Some members have even come out in support of the Air Board's plan. So it's really the Senate carrying this fight, which actually gives Newsom some room to maneuver if he can peel off enough support.
What's the deadline for all of this to get resolved?
The governor and the legislature have until June 30th to reconcile their competing visions. That's just over 2 weeks from today. The outcome is going to determine whether California continues on its traditional polluter pays trajectory or whether it shifts toward a model of industrial subsidization. And the goal of that shift would be to maintain economic stability in what's clearly a volatile energy market.
It sounds like whatever happens, it'll set a precedent far beyond California.
Absolutely. California has long been seen as the national leader on climate policy, so other states and even other countries watch these decisions closely. If Newsom's approach wins out, you could see more states adopting industry-friendly carve-outs in their climate programs. If the Senate prevails, it reinforces the idea that legislatures, not just governors and regulators, get the final say on climate funding. Either way, the next 2 weeks in Sacramento are going to be consequential.
Really illuminating reporting. Chloe, thank you so much for breaking it all down for us this morning.
Always a pleasure, Grace.
Here are some other headlines. In a major diplomatic breakthrough, Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif is making waves by announcing that the United States and Iran have finally reached a final, agreed-upon text for a peace deal. This Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding looks to end a 106-day military conflict that has kept the world on edge. The deal features a comprehensive ceasefire and lifts the naval blockade on Iranian ports while providing a 60-day window to dismantle Tehran's nuclear program. While Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi says they have never been closer to a resolution, President Donald Trump is urging caution over some leaked terms. This comes even as U.S. Central Command reported intercepting Iranian drones in the Strait of Hormuz early Saturday morning. This deal is a critical milestone for energy security, looking to permanently reopen that vital waterway and release $24 billion in frozen assets in exchange for verifiable concessions. The agreement involves the new Iranian leadership under Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei, who stepped into power earlier this year. In news that is truly out of this world, SpaceX made its debut on the Nasdaq, and the stock really took flight. Closing at $160.95, it jumped 19.2% from its initial offering price of $135. This record-breaking move raised $75 billion, valuing the company at a staggering $2.1 trillion. This liftoff officially makes Elon Musk the first trillionaire on the planet, with a net worth of $1.1 trillion. The capital infusion is intended to fund a Mars colonization timeline and expand space-based AI data centers following a merger with xAI. The debut also reportedly minted roughly 4,400 new employee millionaires. While the company is now the sixth largest in the country, surpassing Meta and Tesla, New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani is already calling for billionaire-specific tax reforms. President and COO Gwynne Shotwell says it was simply the right time for the public to gain access to their maturing Starlink and launch businesses. Moving from the stars to the sea, things are certainly a bit heated as forecasters at NOAA declare the arrival of El Niño. Sea surface temperatures in the tropical Pacific are surging, and there is a 63% probability this event will reach Godzilla proportions by the winter of 2026. Scientists warn this could make 2027 the hottest year on record, with WMO Secretary General Celeste Salo calling it an urgent climate warning. This weather pattern could rain on everyone's parade, disrupting global trade and food security while threatening agricultural yields in the southern United States, Southeast Asia, and Eastern Africa. Economists at Stanford warn that these high temperatures could slow economic growth, with peak intensity projected for November through January. Across the pond, the European Union is setting some new boundaries as their new pact on migration and asylum is now in full effect across all 27 member states. This overhaul includes 10 legislative acts for uniform border screening and faster asylum processing. They are also expanding the Eurodac biometric database to include children as young as 6. A new solidarity mechanism requires member states to either accept relocated migrants or pay up. While Ursula von der Leyen calls the rules fair and firm, human rights groups worry about increased attention for the 800,000 people seeking protection annually. Finally, the U.S. men's national team really had a ball in their World Cup opener, securing a historic 4-1 victory over Paraguay. Playing in front of 70,492 fans in Los Angeles, Folarin Balogun scored a first-half brace, and Gio Reyna found the back of the net in stoppage time. It was a pitch-perfect debut for head coach Mauricio Pochettino, setting a record for the most goals scored by the U.S. in a single World Cup match. Fans are keeping an eye on Christian Pulisic, who left early with calf tightness, but the U.S. currently sits at the top of Group D heading into matches against Australia on June 19 and Turkey on June 25. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Opus 4.6, Gemini Pro 3.1, Gemini Flash 3, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.